Well, I'll start out. My name is Byelich, and today I'm going to just share with you, kind of take you through a year in the life of a beef animal at our farm, and a little bit about me. Our family's been in the beef business for 4 or 5 generations now in various places. Um, I've also worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture for 30 some years, and so I've been fortunate to be able to work in the grazing type realm on hundreds of farms and ranches. I spent about half my career in Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, Nevada, working on helping ranchers out there with grazing management, grazing systems, and then the other half here in Michigan. I still work for USDA for a little bit longer. I'm up in Presque Isle and Sheboygan counties with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. But today I'm a farmer. Do how many of you raise beef cattle? Okay, cool. I'm glad to see you guys here, and please keep it let's keep it informal. I mean, if you see something you want to know more about, let me know. We've got plenty of time, so let's enjoy it. So at our present location, we've been there since '75. Harrisville, it's south of Alpena, about 30 miles, and we're just 2 miles inland from Lake Huron. We primarily have Angus cattle, and we hover right around 50 mother cows, and with an assortment of replacement heifers and feeders. Um, I'm going to back up just one slide because this is kind of what a commercial herd would look like. It's primarily Angus. The white faces are a little bit of Hereford influence that is lingering because we used to be all Herefords 35 years ago, and we transitioned to black cattle. My dad did that. He was an extension agent, but I'm kind of guessing it's because black cattle were um, capturing more of the market. You know, it was the Angus Association did a great job of selling people on certified Angus beef, so much so that you would go into grocery stores and you would see it labeled as such, right? So does it taste any better than Hereford or Simmental? I'm not sure, but it is what it is, and I think that had an influence on us choosing black cattle. So we still do that. You can see a couple brown ones out there. We only have one brown one left, and I think it might be that one as a cow. And we only have one white-faced cow left. But what we've started to do is crossbreed with Simmental bulls. Well, historically, a Simmental was also kind of a brownish, whitish colored animal, but now they've genetically made them to be all black as well. So we have Simmental bull that you look at him and think it's probably a black Angus, but it's not. So, but that's a kind of a cross section of our herd. Um, we have about 400 acres at our farm, but a lot of it is forest land or other type of associated ag lands. We've got about 110 acres that's in hay and about 100 acres that we graze. We've got really good soils, loamy, loam, clay loam, silt loam soils. Uh, my mom grew up kind of up where I work, which is up here, and all she did as a kid is pick rocks because it was really stony ground up there. We don't have any of that, so I'm thankful for that. We calve in April and May, and again, traditionally people would calve in January. It had a lot to do, though, years ago because they also were raising row crops and doing a lot of different things, and timing wise, it just fit into their calendar better, is what I think. Um, it made sense to my dad, I think, and it does to us to this day, to, what does Mother Nature do? They're not having babies in January. And so we've shifted our calving to be in from about the 10th of April through May is our target. There's a few that linger after that, but it coincides with green up of grass in the spring. And so that we're trying to better match up with or align with, what's Mother Nature doing? What's the vegetation looking like? And that's an important part. I see, yeah, we raise beef cattle, but at the same time, I really look at the plants and the soil part of it and kind of see myself as like a solar energy manager or something like that, because ultimately that's what's going to put pounds on the cows is the forage, which grows based on because of the sunshine. So I kind of think of it in that realm, I guess. We're a closed herd, which means that we don't buy any animals from outside our herd, except for a new bull every 3 to 4 years. And we run two bulls right now. Um, so all of our females are recruited from within. We think that has a lot of benefits in terms of controlling genetics. We think it keeps the risk of disease and infections and that kind of stuff down. They're not in with mingling with other animals, so that seems to work for us. We do at times use some artificial insemination. We haven't the last 3 or 4 years. It seemed like the success rate was sort of trending down, and so we have opted to go with two bulls. And it's a little easier management with the bulls when you're artificially doing AI. You have to precondition the cows. They have to run kind of as a separate herd. And so we found ourselves running two herds, which kind of doubled your management time. But, at the same time, there have been years where with two bulls we divide into two herds and try to run it that way. The last couple of years we just pooled everybody together, and that seems to, I like that because it gives us more animals to concentrate if we want to. Just it's from a management standpoint, it's made things a little bit simpler for us. Facilities are really important, and I would say mainly it's your working facilities because you're going to have to handle them at different times. And so having a good chute and a system of moving animals up to that point is really important. And this is what we have. That's our chute right there. It's nice to have a roof over it because if it happens to be raining, at least you're not getting soaked while you're in there with the animals. Um, the only time our animals ever see the inside of a barn is if they just calved like this one did and it's 34 degrees and raining outside. Otherwise, their whole life they spend outdoors. And that's a change from my grandfather and great grandfather's time because they would always have large lounging areas inside the building for the cattle to get in out of the weather. And we don't believe that that is necessary. We think that for us, a windbreak is a barn or a woodlot is a barn, that our biggest concern is wind. They've got plenty of insulation built in that they don't need to be inside. Like I say, it's nice if you have that option if they just calved and it's a younger cow maybe and the weather's really bad. You don't want that calf getting chilled to be able to get them inside for a day or so. So we have that ability once in a while it's necessary and we're able to do that. I can think of a time about 4 years ago, right at the very beginning of the calving season in April. I think we had 6 calves drop one day, and it was the worst conditions ever. It was, like I say, about 35 degrees, raining, not just a mist, but like rain all day long. And so But we had enough places we could put one or here, put two there, and we got them inside, and it made a lot of difference. But this is typically we have windbreaks that these were planted, obviously years ago, and so we strategically will feed where there's wind protection throughout the winter. And so every day that I'm there and going to be uh, feeding, I always about noon I'm looking at my phone. Where's the wind coming from? And then it's kind of based on then I pick an area to go feed. We're never in confinement. We're always out on pasture year round. So we take hay out to them. When I say we, I should also explain my mother, who just turned 80. She's the one there all week long doing everything, and so I'm there on the weekends giving her a break, but she's jumping up and down off the tractor, rolling out round bales, just whatever needs to be done, she's doing it. Uh, so uh, no, we give them mineral. They have free choice of mineral, and we have to add a little extra selenium because our soils are low on selenium in that part of the state, and so it's a kind of a generic mix, a beef breeder mineral mix that we use, and it's free choice. Um, I think this is we do. It's primarily grass. There is some, depending on which field it comes from. Some has alfalfa in the mix. Most of it has red clover. That seems to be almost naturally occurring there. Like all of our pastures are a mix of orchard grass, brome, red clover, a little bit of timothy, a little bit of trefoil, and the red clover's never been seeded. It just seems to be there. And I think with our management, must somehow lend it to keep uh, maintain its position, I guess, in the plant community. Because a lot of people will say, well, it's a biennial, so it's only going to last 2 years, the red clover. But, you know, we do frost seed once in a while, but most pastures we never do, yet we still have that plant community maintaining. Fencing, we use high tensile wire. It's nothing fancy. We try to keep it as simple as we can and that it's functional. You can't see it too much here, but this is a perimeter fence. We just run 3 wires. Top and bottom one is hot, middle one is cold. This happened to be a set of twins that we had, I think last year. All of our interior fences that are permanent are just one hot wire. And with cow, calf, that works fine. If we ran yearlings, I would at least have 2 wires because they're like teenagers and they can be more of a challenge to keep where you would like them to be at all times. We do have some areas that we exclude the cattle from, that, wetter areas, the trees. We don't want them in the trees. And we'll use 2 wires there. Again, just to discourage them from crawling in there because they get curious. So that's kind of the extent of our fencing on the place. We do a lot of temporary fence in the summertime to manage the grazing. Our water system, water is really important. In the summertime, we have water scattered in a lot of different locations. In the wintertime, they basically have to come up to the headquarters to drink out of a frost-free drinker. And so we don't winter feed more than about a half a mile away. In the summertime, the forage actually provides a lot of moisture that sometimes doesn't get credited. And if it's good lush forage out there, they may be getting up to 75% of their water right from the plants. So they don't need to go drink 30 gallons out of the tank. And a lot of times you don't see them doing that. Um, Another important part is we like to make sure the calves can get into that tank. And so we'll put some, like a couple of cement blocks or something, or pile up some dirt along one end of it so the calf can kind of get up there and get their nose in the tank. The water's about this far from the top, so they can, as long as they get their nose in there, they can drink. But even though they're drinking milk, water is still really important for the calves, especially as you move through the summer. And they're eating forage more and more too and getting some water that way. But we like to make sure they can also get access. We cover the tanks when the cattle are not in there. It keeps the algae growth down and keeps other things from falling in the tank or drinking out of the tank. We happen to be in the tuberculosis zone, which adds another whole element. What I'm not really going to talk about that today, but it's another constriction on operations for us. But it's another reason we cover the tanks, so we don't want the deer drinking from the same places that the cattle do. Not that we've ever seen them do it, but it's something we can control to reduce risk. Why not do it? It's easy to do, and like I say, you get the added benefit. It keeps the water cooler. Algae doesn't tend to take off in there. Keeps the water cleaner. So I talked about kind of this solar energy thing, and it's how I think about it. And this is a good picture of kind of what our pasture mix looks like. You can see a little bit of trefoil, some red clover, and a lot of this is orchard grass in there. And those are our primary forages. And we watch the plants pretty closely. So I threw this slide in here. So a lot of times when I give a talk, I have my USDA hat on, and I'm kind of giving people information about grazing management and what we think is helpful and good practices. And so when I worked out west, there's like this forage management continuum. One end of the spectrum, when I was out west, they used to say it was the Christopher Columbus style of grazing management. You turn them out in the spring and go discover them in the fall. And so basically that equates to having just large areas. You just kind of let them go, and whatever happens, happens. And then there's the Genghis Khan other end of it, where everything is like massed and impact, but keep moving. You've heard the term mob grazing. I wouldn't say we're doing that, but we try to make sure we manage the animals in such a way that we get good uniform use across each unit that they're in. And so how we do that in the summertime, well, I guess here one more thing that we also keep in mind is a lot of research has been done on plants' response to grazing, what happens over time. And what they found is you can graze or remove forage down to a certain level and have no impact on the root system or the sustainability of an individual plant. But once you get below that threshold, then it kind of starts to compress from both sides. And so over time, you end up losing your best plants, and you get the ones that favor, that grow low to the ground and aren't nearly as productive. So we try to live up in this realm with our management. We shoot for about 4 inches. That's what all the research took it down. When they were measuring these things, they found that most of the cool season grasses, if you stopped grazing at 4 inches, there was no long-term negative impact. Higher is probably a little bit better. That's more leaf area. So if you leave it at 5 or 6 inches, then you're probably going to have that much more production next time you come through. So we try to not have, but it doesn't. So what that means is that no plant is grazed below 4 inches in the unit is what we try to do. But of course, animals being animals, they are going to come in and spot graze. You can't really stop them from biting closer than that. sometimes, but you can influence it with animal numbers. When they've got all that peer pressure out there, they don't tend to stand just in one spot and just munch, 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 munch all the way down. So it's like an art, right? They always said there's the art of grazing management as well as a science to it. And so we think we understand the science really well, and we're still working on the art of trying to get it right. And it's I don't know that we ever get it completely right, but we keep, you know, hoping that we're moving in that direction. You have these in your handout, and I'm not going to go into any detail on this, but the main thing I wanted to mention to you is this idea of usable forage. So just because you have so much out there, when you're figuring out how many animals you should run out there, you can't allocate everything to them. Because like we said, you know, some of that the plant needs, the lower 4 inches at least, and then they're going to, you know, poop and pee on some of it, they're going to trample some of it, and so you have to try to come up with an approximation of, you know, how much of that really will they ingest, and then from that you'll know how many animals you can run and for how long. And so this is something that we try to calculate it as best we can. But usable forage and harvest efficiency, I believe, are really critical pieces of this. Harvest efficiency, obviously, the fewer animals you have, the bigger the space, the lower the efficiency, because now they can just pick and choose. We want to eliminate selectivity as much as we can, which increases harvest efficiency. So more animals, smaller spaces, you're going to harvest more of the available product that's out there.
So that's the worry of mob grazing. I mean, it's a lot of work because you're moving animals
Yep.
a lot, but
That's
the big
that's the benefit of doing that. Yep. And you know, I work with people all over the spectrum, and some folks they're like, you know what, I can only do it once a day or something, and so we help plan accordingly. And we'll say, okay, well, then let's lay out your pasture system like this, you know, and if they are willing to be more intensive, we can set that up as well. So this is what our place looks like looking down on it. Everywhere with a P is a pasture, and every dark line is a permanent one hot wire. In the summertime, we have water back here, headquarters, and we have 2 tanks down here. So I was just explaining, I'm kind of going through how we do things at our place with beef cattle. This is how our pastures are laid out. And we don't spend any more than 1 day in a unit. So depending on who is there, because when you're in a family business, every person sort of has their own ideas about how to do things. And so where do we all agree in our family? Well, at least everybody will at least move the cows once a day. So from one unit to another unit. So at least we know that's going to happen. And we have about 30 permanent units, so we can always get at least about 30 days of rest. Now, so yeah, you see they're different sizes, but typically I would say the average permanent pasture is about 3 acres. But then what we do is in the summertime with temporary fencing, we really make them small and move more frequently. And by doing that, we get much more uniform use and a much higher harvest efficiency of the available forage. But again, it kind of depends on who's there. So when I'm there, this is what happens. And sometimes when other family members are there, it's not quite so intensive, but sometimes it is. It just depends. But it's
You said that's about 3 acres for 50 cows per unit.
yeah, well, so like these big ones are, these are smaller here, so they're moving even without the temporary, they're moving quicker. But each of these, is roughly about 3 acres. And
So those smaller parcels, would you move them more than once a day then?
yes, so even without the temporary, um, yeah, even if all the herd is in here, usually a day they're going to be moved. It's just not enough.
Are you just using your sacrifice areas in winter for like bale grazing, or
Well, yeah, and they're not. I don't even use that word. I mean, they look like it now, look like they've been sacrificed. But so, as you can imagine, everything that's closer to the headquarters probably gets more bales put out in the winter. But we'll feed bales all the way back to here during the winter. This water is seasonal, so it's not there. So then they have to walk up the lane to get a drink, or they eat snow, which a lot of them do learn to eat snow. Um, but we never assume that they're all going to, so we always make sure there's water somewhere for them. But we will then, when we winter feed, um, we use round bales, and we'll do one of two things. We either roll the bale out, or we do the bale grade. We just set the bales on end and let the cows just work it down. And so we tend to do the bale grazing in areas where we think that we'd like to see some soil improvements. Uh, there's certain areas of certain pastures, and so those are the ones we will bale graze in to try to get a lot more organic matter kind of concentrated in smaller areas to hopefully improve and build the soil, some of the quality features of the soil. And no, I mean, not usually. Sometimes I will do some frost seeding with some red clover and ryegrass, perennial ryegrass, but not always. And it's interesting because it can look like uh, almost a moonscape sometimes now. And you go back the 1st of July, and I mean, other than you can feel it, that, okay, the ground's kind of rough because it was, wet or whatever when they were in there. But um, sometimes we do, but generally speaking, and I think uh, a lot of guys that I work with, farmers, would say, well, Boyd, every so many years you got to tear up a pasture and reseed it. And I'm going, that's to myself. And I'm like, well, that really hasn't been our experience. Would we be further ahead to do that? I'm not sure, but we feel like these pastures are in good shape. We still have the plant communities that we like. Almost everything out there is eatable. It's eat 'em, as we might say. Um,
Roughly, I mean, when you're doing kind of a visual inspection and
mhm.
you start growing back and you can really differentiate the different plants, what, the clovers versus the grasses, what kind of ratio do you try to look for?
60 to 40, 70 30. Grass to legume. And I watch the cows a lot, so I like being more intensive because it gets you more time with the herd. They know you better, they respond better. You notice things in the animals, but I'll just sit there and watch so what do you do when I just put you in here? What plants are you going to first? I think they prefer the grasses over legumes. When I watch them come in, it looks just to me like they're kind of walking by the clover and the alfalfa, if there's some out there, and eating the grass. And then as they come back over, they start picking up the legume. That's the way it seems to me. Um, so that's a picture of kind of using the temporary fence to further subdivide a unit. So I mean, you can see there's the other fence. This is pretty small. But again, we don't have the whole herd here. This is early in the calving season, so these are some of the cows that would have been the first ones to calve. So the other ones are still back in the calving area, and these guys are now out here. We like the temporary fence. We don't care where the calves go because we know that when they're hungry, they're coming back to mom. As the season goes on, there's an advantage that the calves can kind of first chance at the better forage as you're moving them around. They sneak under the fence and start to graze before the cows can get in there. So the calves get the get the ice cream. Um, Once in a while we have some issues, but generally speaking, this has worked really well for us. And it's as long as you're moving the animals when you should. Otherwise, they will move themselves and take the fence with them, you know. Because I guarantee you, I mean, you'll feel it if you bump the fence, but it's not a knock you down kind of charge. I would like it to be more. I'd always tell my mom, I want a fence so when the grandkid touches it, knocks them on their butt, But we don't have that.
So how long do you keep the calves? Do you keep the calves always with the mothers?
For 6 months. Well, 5 months, I guess. We wean around the 20th of September. So June, July, August, September. Yeah, so they're 5 months old. I guess the ones born in May, June, July, August, they're only 4 months old, and we're weaning. So yeah, we pull the calves, all of them, unless it's a late. You get a few stragglers. They calve in June or something. Then those calves don't wean with everybody else. They stay with the mother. Another advantage, I think, with the intensive management is our fertility. We get a much more even distribution of manure across the pasture by doing it more concentrated with the animals versus if they were just selective. And there's a lot of evidence that as long as your legume component is more than 30% of your pasture, you don't need any extra nitrogen out there. That there'll be enough naturally fixed, both for the plant fixing it and to share with the grasses who really need it. Some people will throw on some extra nitrogen because you will see a response in the grasses. But then you have to look at what's the cost of nitrogen, what's the response, is that something I want to do or not? Some research shows that it does pay off to do that, but we don't do that. We pretty much let the cows do it. As I mentioned, we winter feed in the deficient pastures, and our soils are selenium deficient, so we have to supplement the cattle with that, a little bit extra selenium. I'll just put these up here. So with the intensive management, just some observations that we have made, or that I guess I have made, is it's always better to leave more than take more. And by adhering to, moving when the pasture is about this high, increasing harvest efficiency, you actually get more forage production. And for our operation, for the acres that are in the grazing system, it allows us to run 5 more mother cows than if we weren't managing the way we are. And so that's an economic return, an improvement by being able to do that. And it's probably that's a conservative estimate. The 4-inch stubble height seems sustainable, but I think if you could do it with a little bit more, the good rule of thumb always has been take half, leave half. So if the forage is this high, take it down and move. Because one of the things we're always challenged with cool season grasses is getting ahead of it before they want to go to seed, which is they want to do that in June. So we're always trying to make sure we get through every pasture to try to keep everything in a vegetative growth state. Not because once they go into that reproductive state, then the vegetative growth tends to slow down. So we want to keep things in a vegetative growth state. It takes about an hour a day for us to do the management in the summertime, which to me That's not bad. Basically, jump in the gator or the four-wheeler with an armful of step-in posts and a spool of wire, and I go hook it on one end and drive it to the other plant, and then walk back, put the posts in, and then the cows they're already looking like they know it's coming. So you have to be careful too that they see us and they associate that with more new feed. So even if they just got put into a place, an hour ago, if we happen to come close to them, man, they come up and they start coming towards us, thinking we're going somewhere else where there's even more ice cream. It's an observation. Like I say, they learn the game pretty quickly, and we never have to like push the cows. It's more of please come in. It's and literally they do. They all come. It's like we got more uniform nutrient distribution. I think the more eye time with the herd is really underrated because I will notice things like just by in the process of that 1 hour watching them walk through into the next pasture like that calf looks a little bit odd or that cow looks like maybe she's limping a little bit. So I think we catch things earlier by doing it that way. Um, Easier handling, again, more time with the animals. They get to know us. They know what we I think look like, what we smell like, what we sound like. And so like you could probably come to our place and put on my hat and my coat and get pretty close to them, I think. But if someone comes over and we're going to go out and look at the cows and they recognize it's not us. Although lately I'm surprised we had a winter pasture walk in February 6th. So MSU Extension uh, sort of organizes and hosts these pasture walks across the state, generally from May to October during the growing season. And so we've hosted some at our farm a few times. And so they were wanting to try to do a winter one to see what do guys do in the wintertime, what kind of management strategies, feeding strategies, how do you manage mud, which this year came very early. In fact, the Michigan Forage and Grazing Conference was just a couple days ago in St. John's, and we did a talk there about mud management because it's definitely a challenge every year. You just can't avoid it. You're going to have some mud. But with that winter pasture walk and the people there, I was surprised the animals were as they just kind of hung out. I think a lot of it's the winter time too. They're moving a lot slower. They don't want to spend any extra energy, and so they just kind of stand there. Summertime, I feel like they would like head the other way. And on our farm, I feel like with the numbers, and I actually clip. That's a great way to know what you have out there is to clip some plots to know how many pounds per acre your pastures are producing. And I feel like we're pretty close in balance with the animal numbers we have and the amount of forage that we have available. And when we're working with, like when I'm working with other farmers and ranchers, they always say, well, what's a good starting point? And I always say 2 acres of pasture per cow calf, generally speaking. Some places where you have more moisture, longer growing season, it might be closer to 1 acre, depending again what you have out there. This is assuming you have a pretty good mixture of grasses and legumes in your pastures. So in southern Michigan, maybe 1 acre you can do it. Where up in northern, like up in here where I work, I always tell guys, okay, you're looking at running eight cows, because I do work with a lot of people that are just kind of easing into the cattle business. Then I'll say then you're probably going to need about 16 acres of pasture. And as you get started, look at it, and maybe you'll decide, oh, I needed more pasture, or I could have more animals. But to me, it's a good starting point. 2 acres per cow. Tools of the trade. Again, pretty simple. Step-in post. We use poly tape. A lot of guys use poly wire, and I'm thinking of maybe moving in that direction. The tape is a good visual because it kind of ripples in the wind, but I think the poly wire might carry a little more of a charge than the tape does, and I'm kind of thinking I would like to have a little more energy in the line. But it's relatively inexpensive to do the temporary fencing. I feel like what we get in return in terms of more forage production and better management far offsets the cost of doing this. The dog is sometimes helpful, sometimes not. So this particular dog was a mixture between an Australian Shepherd and a Border Collie, right? So one of them by instinct is a header, the other one is a heeler, meaning that the way they manage animals is to go at them from the front or from behind. So half the time the dog got it right, and the other time, half the time the cows went the wrong direction. So the best place for her was in the gator. Now I hope this will work. So I have a little bit of a video. This is winter feeding round bales. Several of our pastures have kind of long hills in them. And so we take advantage of gravity, and let's hope this works. Now we roll the round bales down the hill. Use gravity to our advantage. Nice thing about this, it spreads out the hay on the hillside. It's don't tend to get quite as much sun. This way we can make sure that they deposit more of that stuff on the hills as part of our nutrient management program. So it's a great way to get fertilizer on the hillsides, right? It's kind of risky to run the tractor back and forth if you are going to say we're going to put fertilizer out there. And so, and it's an easy way to roll out the bales. We have to be more careful on subsequent bales because then the cows are more scattered out that you don't whack one of them when you're rolling it down the hill. That's why I call it bowling for cows. I've maybe hit a couple of them.
So you think it helps manage your mudding up, the fact that they're not all congregating around one bale?
It definitely does. And then the other advantage of rolling out the bales is you can come back next time and just move over 10 feet and do the same thing. So over the course of the winter, the whole pasture gets good nutrient distribution on it. So we like rolling them out versus the bale grazing part. And we also calculate things too. We estimate the weight of the animal, their forage demand. We figure it's, between 2 to 3% of their body weight. And so from that we calculate this is how much hay we need to feed, each day to the animals. And as depending on their gestation period, we will increase that. We may change the feed a little bit to improve up the quality of it. Also, as they get into the third trimester, so this is kind of what it looks like after some have been rolled down there, but you see how spread out the cows are. The other thing it eliminates is any social interactions. So if you're going to bale graze, you always have to put enough bales out so everybody gets headspace. Otherwise, the dominant ones they'll even stand sideways. I mean, I don't know why they do this, but they do. And whereas this way, you pretty much eliminate that. So even the younger, more submissive ones, subordinate animals, can have equal access to the forage. So like right now we're feeding like one bale of second cutting and 2 bales of first cutting each day. And so by rolling it out, everybody gets a chance at the second cutting. Because especially the older cows, it's not as important. The younger ones, not only do they have a calf inside of them growing, but they're still growing. They're not at their full body, mature body size yet either, the 2 and 3 year olds. So we like to get equal access, distribute the nutrients more evenly, reduce social dominance.
And maybe, I think you kind of described this earlier, but when you're doing your moves in the winter, is it mainly around where the best wind breaks are and where you want the fertility to be the next year?
It is.
Probably a little bit less frequently, but you're still moving.
Still moving. Yep. And if there's no wind, then we'll, go somewhere where it's more wide open, on a day that there's not so much wind, but always trying to kind of systematically work our way across the pasture. And so, yeah, the farthest pastures don't get much winter grazing, so the closer ones are getting more nutrients applied to them. Um, so what we try to do is early in the fall, whenever we start feeding, is when we'll feed, you know, far away, and while the water lines aren't frozen yet, we can still get water out to the west. That's sort of been our strategy. But in the middle of winter, our only option is to water back at the buildings right now. Although there are some geothermal drinkers now, and we actually just, with one of our customers, when I have my USDA hat on, installed some all-season winter waterers with these tubes that go down in the ground about 7 feet, and you're letting just the heat of the ground keep them from freezing. And so he's kind of an experiment. I told Ryan, I said, we're going to be watching you really close. If this works at your farm, then I'm going to look at maybe doing something like that here so that we can feed further out.
Great cost share opportunity.
It is, yeah, because with NRCS, who I work for, a couple different programs that we have, if you get involved in that, they will pay at least half of the cost of a lot of these things. And so it's something to think about. And a lot of times it's even higher if you're newer into the farming game. I mean, you can approach 90% cost share on some of these things. So I would encourage you to reach out at least and see what your local contact person has to offer. But it's a great opportunity to help out with not only the technical side, but also some of the financial parts of this. A little bit on nutrition. Obviously the younger animals need a higher plane of nutrition because they're developing, they're growing. This is roughly kind of the way we target it. With the cows, all they ever eat is hay and grass. They don't need near as much as younger cows and the calves do. So you can and it's in your notes, but protein and total digestible nutrients are a couple things you can look at. And these are sort of the way we approach it. We found with the calves, if we got much higher protein than that, they seemed to cause issues. It was just a little too hot for them. And but when we wean the calves, we start them out on grain. The rest of the time, all they ever have is grass and milk. And so people will say, well, are you guys grass fed? Yeah, we are. Are you grass finished? We are, but we also add a little bit of grain at the end. That's how we do it. So we polish them up. But the higher protein is more important because they're still developing bone structure and in their bodies, tissue development. Higher plane of nutrients is better because their gut is smaller, so if it's better nutrition, then at least what's in there is all good stuff that they can and is more available for them. So those are reasons that we like to see higher digestibility in the feed. I would say 3 years old, roughly. We do sample our hay, so we'll go out every year and take some cores out of the round bales and send it in and get an analysis done. It never seems to change a whole lot, but at least we know we're still giving them, meeting these planes that we target. Like, yep, our hay is still kind of at these levels, or we'll know that, yeah, these bales here, we should feed to these guys because they're a little bit better quality. So we do forage sample. We soil test about every 3 to 5 years in the pastures, just to kind of see where things are at. And over time, it hasn't shown that any additional nutrients are needed.
What's happened to your organic matter over the years?
It's increasing. Yeah, it's coming up, which you would expect. It does, and I think the fact that we aren't, ripping it up every 8 years because we think that it needs to be reseeded, and we're like, oh, I don't think it does. And some people do that, but we don't. A little bit about our breeding program. As I mentioned, we're a closed herd. Those are a couple of replacement heifers right there. They're probably 8 months, 7 months old maybe at that point in time. That's one of the bulls. But again, this is in the winter out feeding. You can see that's pasture. And so maybe that day the winds were out of the south, so I was like, all right, let's go out there because there's a woodlot there to block the wind. Because that's a big deal. I mean, in terms of forage demand, it doesn't matter how cold it is. It's if you can, once the temperature gets below 18 degrees Fahrenheit, they need more feed. And if you don't block the wind, then where they are is like whatever that real feel is with the wind chill. But if we can block the wind, then we can still feed them whatever the thermometer would read. And anytime the temperature or the real feel is below 18 degrees, then they need another percentage of what you would normally feed them in their diet. So let's say we figured the cows need, 30 pounds of dry matter a day. Well, now they need more than that, a few more pounds. So we want to make sure we're getting them enough when it's really cold out. Another thing that when it comes to forage allocation that I don't know if people take into account is that all your hay, no matter how dry it looks, has at least 10% moisture in it. So if you're trying to do your calculations and you have a 700-pound bale, well, that's not 700 pounds of feed. That's, minus 70 pounds. That's 630 pounds, really. So if you credit the whole 700, you will underfeed your cattle. So just keep that in mind. All hay, no matter how dry, has moisture. We test our bulls for soundness in the spring, just so we know that whoever's going out there is capable of doing the job. We turn the bulls out around the 4th of July, and if we did AI or when we did AI, we did that at the same time. We preg check all of our cows at the beginning of November. Why do we want to keep a cow through the winter if she's not pregnant? If she's not giving anything back from all the inputs that are going into her. So I'm surprised how many guys don't pregnancy check, but we think it's really important. So this was what I call the perfect cow. This was that winter pasture walk on February 6th. So you can see it's crazy that we don't have, usually we have snow this deep, but not this year. And I don't think we had much last year. But so yeah, the cows were pretty, you can see how they just kind of were hanging out. And actually other people are like right here. But this cow is more or less a pet, which has its own problems sometimes. But I call her the perfect cow because she maybe weighs, 1,150 pounds, yet she'll wean a calf just as big as our 1,500-pound cows do. And so the inputs for her are much less than they are for that bigger animal. And so we're trying to get our cow sizes down a little bit because we still are able to get just as good a calf, as many pounds a calf out of it as we can the big cow. So to me, she's a perfect cow. When her calf is like 4 months old, her calf will be, this big on her. It's crazy. You look at it, you're like, yeah, I think so. And it's probably through the females, the dam, that we would do that. We do study when we're going to buy a bull. We look at EPDs, which are your expected progeny differences, and we select for docility because we don't want to get hurt. We don't want anybody else to get hurt. We select for calving ease, so we don't have difficulties at birthing. And we've been very fortunate that it seems like that is working. And so I guess what our approach is with the bulls, we use those factors. And then as we look at the cows, as we're selecting replacement heifers, it's like, okay, what's her mother look like? Was she a great big old thing, or was she a smaller animal? We look at their behavior, even like when the calf is in the chute, are they, you know, excitable, or are they calm? We take notes of that, and we also with the mothers the same thing. We always have notes, and so we'll go, oh yeah, that's right. Her grandmother was kind of edgy, so maybe we don't want to keep her, you know. And so we try to do take management at that to that level with what we do. Um, as I mentioned, calve April and May, wean around the September 20th. That's my daughter with the calf. We've got a rope on it. So when our calves are about 3 days old, we do give them a vaccination as well as vitamin injection just because they're born with nothing. They do get it from the mother, but we can accelerate the process and make sure that they're getting some key things right off the bat. We also we castrate our bull calves at about 4 days of age. So we try to distance ourselves from the cow if we can, just because they're so protective. But we never really had any trouble. But still, sometimes they get a little excited. So especially when you're castrating, because that's a little rougher thing. Um, Again, this is in your handout. This is kind of our program that we use. These are the vitamins that we give. Selenium and vitamin E are together, and vitamin A and D. And we give them this particular vaccination because it's going to prevent scours and respiratory problems, a number of things like that. And you know, at weaning, there's another regimen that we do to get them ready for either going to somebody else's feedlot or being recruited into our herd. We also finish some ourselves in direct market. And then the cows get an annual booster when we preg check in November. We do not give any antibiotics or growth hormones in our operation. If we do have to give antibiotics, then that's one that we eat, or it goes to a feedlot in Nebraska, and McDonald's gets it. Some of our processing is done on farm. We've got a couple processors that will come right to the farm and do it. And then some goes to another processor to get processed. We vacuum pack any meat that we're going to sell because customers seem to like to be able to see what they're buying. If we're keeping it, it's paper wrapped because that's 5 cents, 10 cents cheaper. The paper wrap, the vacuum pack does. Yeah, I agree. Yep. So, nope. We do direct sales, and basically, um, you know, you're kind of like trying to sell part of a live animal to people ahead of time. It's sort of the way that works. Um, keep the meat separate from anything that's personal. It's locked up in a separate building, separate freezers. Um, so it's basically been by a little bit on social media, a little bit with Facebook. And we don't sell a lot. We sell just a few animals. We're trying to build it each year. So each year we're like direct marketing one more. And it's a lot of local people who know where our farm is. They see how we take care of things. Because yeah, when we don't give it away. But we don't, you know, I think our prices are still fairly low. So we do get a lot of local customers buying, a few that are from further away. But again, you know, so we're talking maybe we have 30 customers that we sell to. But I believe that is the where you want to be profitable. You know, I think if we had 500 cows, then maybe just selling feeders to a feedlot would be profitable. But I don't see us going that way. I like doing it this way. I enjoy relationships with the people, and people that are interested in what we're doing. We always say, come on over, we'll take you around, we'll show you what we're doing, and kind of make them feel like they're part of things. We do a harvest dinner every fall at our farm, invite family, friends, all of our customers can come in, and we just cook a big old pot of food, and it's just little things like that I think help. Um, you see if I don't know if I have anything else here or not. Nope, that's it. So that is the last slide, but yeah, go ahead. So these are about 17 months probably. Yep. Yep. 17, 18 months. That's how it works out. Um, so usually if it was born in April or May, then in the following a year, Decemberish, they get processed. Um, what else was I going to say about that? I don't know if I was.
And do you sell cuts of meat?
Nope. 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 It's all packaged. But we do.
I meant like, do you have it so that, oh, I just need a couple pounds of hamburger?
Nope.
Yeah, we don't know.
So, but we do 1/8, which we found that to be a lot of people around us do a quarter and a half. But it seems to me the 1/8 niche is a good place to live because there are so many people who are just couples now, or they maybe have two little kids, and that's just about a perfect amount to carry them almost a year. I mean, you get a few steaks, a few roasts, 25, 30 pounds of burger. It just seems to be a good niche, I think, that uh, is what we found. Once in a while we'll sell a quarter, but usually it's an eighth. And then I also tell people, some people say, I want to buy a whole beef. And I said, I won't sell you a whole beef. I said, I'll sell you an eighth. You see if you like it. Because I don't want you to get stuck with a bunch of product that you don't like, and then you tell everybody, don't buy beef from those guys, or that you're just stuck with a product that you're not happy with. Because I know how I would feel about that. And so, not that we've had any negative experiences, but I that's just what my approach is. I kind of handle all the marketing side of it. Um, Even though it's not my forte, it's pushed me out of my comfort zone and made me learn a lot more about it, and also, have more interactions with people about the product. Um, so it's been a growing opportunity for me as well. Any other questions?
What do you, so you're not, is a smaller percentage that you're direct marketing?
Yes, they go through to a feeder sale. Yeah. So we typically West Branch has a feeder sale. That's the closest one, and that's where we tend to go. Sometimes we'll go to send some to Gaylord, but those are the two places that we'll send feeder calves. There are a couple of people actually buy right from the farm. Though we have a couple of people who finish them out themselves, and they'll come to the farm, and we'll just say, well, this is what the going price is, what we could get at the sale, so that's what the price is. Um, and that's better, right? Because then the animals, it's one less time they're being hauled, and anytime you can minimize that, you're doing a lot for the health of the animal, quality of the animal. That's what we believe. Yeah, thank you guys for your interest. Um, let me, if you're interested, let me give you my phone number, just in case you felt like you wanted to call, or if you're ever up in the Harrisville area and you want to stop by. It's area code 307 286 4807, and that's my cell number. When I moved back here from Wyoming 8 years ago, I just never changed it. It's just so a lot of times I'll call people and they won't answer, right? They think I'm spam. So I have to text them saying, "This is Boyd. I'm trying to call you." Oh, okay. But anyway,
So you cattle ranched in Wyoming as well?
worked with ranchers out there, yeah, because I worked for NRCS, but I spent, from the late 80s until 10 years ago out there working. And so I've worked all over those states out there. So for me, it's like I got to see how 500 people do things, right? And learn from them. What a great opportunity for me. So I try to remember all that stuff and kind of roll it into how we do things, and hopefully it's a way that's more you know, ecologically sound and profitable. So thank you guys again.